sure. No, you're good.
So the reading is from Luke chapter 10, verses 25 to 37. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What is written in the law?" he replied. "How do you read it?" He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbour as yourself." "You've answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this and you will live." But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, "Who is my neighbour?" In reply, Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes and beat him and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he travelled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, a day's wage, and gave them to the innkeeper. "Look after him," he said, "and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have." Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbour to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? The expert in the law replied, "The one who had mercy on him." Jesus told him, "Go and do likewise."
Amen. Well done, Chris. Again, excellent. Thank you ever so much. You can use the ramp. Oh, okay. Honestly, it's good, but I wasn't... So it's quite a well-known story of Jesus, reminding us of a godly desire to be nurtured, that should be nurtured in us, that gives us courage to overcome the man-made cultures of race, ethnicity, class and individualism in favour of being a community-minded people who value others regardless of whether they are part of the same group as us. And this basic but difficult fact acts as a driver to Jesus' story. Go and do likewise. It is more than a story of being ready to give first aid to someone you come across who is unwell or on the street. Although, of course, if you do, please give them first aid. It's not an action to get first aid training, although, of course, it's a useful skill. It is more than that. It is more than a call to regard as neighbour those who do not actually live next door, or even to regard those only in our immediate area as neighbour. The call that Jesus makes in this parable is a reminder that we are part of something bigger than ourselves, that we are part of a community of people. The call that Jesus makes in this parable is to love our neighbour. Just 4 words describe the mission he sets for his followers. Go and do likewise. And yet, it's not a simple thing to do. The call that Jesus makes is none other than a radical, intentional and counter-cultural, constant series of acts to regard other humans as an object of God's love, and by extension, a recipient of godly love from us to them. Shall I just say that bit one more time? The call that Jesus makes is none other than a radical, intentional and counter-cultural, constant series of acts to regard every other human as an object of God's love. In other words, created and a recipient of God's love. And by extension, a recipient of godly love from us to them. Got some stories for you, because I love stories, so I'm hoping that you have at least some love too. One of my former work colleagues said to me, "Hey, you got 2 boys, right? And they're older than mine, so I need a bit of advice from you." And I was a bit taken aback by this, because I'm thinking, yeah, you've been to our house. You met me with my lads, and, you actually know what you're asking here. Yeah, but your boys are older. Tell me something, he said. Will they stop fighting each other? He evidently had 2 boys that were fighting each other. And do you know what? I was really pleased to be able to give him some comfort in this moment. And I said to him, "It's okay. Your lads will stop fighting each other." And it's almost like I could see him physically come out from under a weight that was pushing down on his shoulders. His face changed. And it actually lightened up with me saying to him, they will stop fighting. As they get older, they will. It might be high school, might be a bit more, but they will stop fighting each other. He was like, "Oh, it's great." But I had to deliver him some bad news as well. I said to him, "But the thing is, they'll start beating you up instead." There's that whole, anyone who's got boys will know there's this whole kind of alpha male stuff that goes on as they start seeking their independence. And so in our case, it was the boys started beating me up instead. In fact, one of them, our youngest, reminded me that the house in which we were living, I need to be careful with it, because actually one day it'd be his. Switched on, wasn't he? But I'm pleased to say our boys have, because of God's intervention here and God's love, they've grown up. They remain a blessing to us. They are both living out lives of faith with Jesus and with their families. Perhaps I should have, it's a shame I didn't know that at the time. I hoped it at the time, of course, but I wasn't able to tell my colleague that bit at that moment. But arguments do happen, don't they? We misunderstand each other, and we take offence at each other, even if it's not meant. Sometimes it is meant, and if we've done that, we have to come before God and say, "Oh, sorry, I've let anger and emotions get over the top of me," instead of asking you to work through my emotions. We get upset at each other. It happens. Anyone who lives quite close to another human being, so particularly in families, that's where we have the least patience, I think. We tend to have those least patience with the ones dearest and closest to us. Maybe because it is that place of safety and we feel a bit freer to vent. But of course, we get misunderstandings. We get arguments. For Sarah and I, we were so pleased of the influence that our boys had from the church group that we were at, particularly with the Sunday school leader who nurtured them as with the other children. And we recognise, actually, Sarah and I are only ever stewards to our children. They belong first and foremost to the Lord. So if you're a parent and you've not actually given in your heart and your mind your children back to the Lord, just take a moment to do that now. You're actually a temporary steward. You are given the privilege as well as the responsibility by God to nurture them, to teach them, to bring them up, to be their parent. But their ultimate parent is the Lord. So make sure, A, they know that, and B, you know that. But let me remind you of where the story of the Good Samaritan started. An expert in the law of Moses, a guardian of the moral, the civil, and the ceremonial laws for the Israelites, asked Jesus a very personal question. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake the feeling that neither law and order, or a moral code, or the ceremonial laws actually made himself good before God. He knew his flaws and his weaknesses. And so he asked Jesus a personal question, which basically said, I do all these things, but I've got these niggling doubts about my how God sees me. And Jesus' reply, love God with everything you have. Love your neighbour as you love yourself. And then he gave a context for the law. But just before I get to that context, C.S. Lewis began his explanation of Christianity by saying, everybody has heard people quarrelling. Sometimes it sounds funny. Sometimes it sounds unpleasant. Quarrelling means trying to show that the other is wrong. There would be no sense in doing it unless you had some sort of agreement as to what was right and wrong. C.S. Lewis called this the law of human nature. This expert in Hebrew law held to a very firm set of laws covering behaviour to God and to others. Yet he recognised that he struggled to achieve this full compliance, despite expecting others to do so. All 12 tribes had this agreed constitution called the Law of Moses. And yet they too argued amongst themselves. Some rose up violently against each other. Some rose up violently against others, such as the Roman rulers of the land. And against a people group who used to be part of the tribes of Israel, called the Samaritans. Jesus knew this, and in answering the man, he makes the hero of the story a Samaritan. If ever there was a story that built upon the misgivings of the expert of the law, well, this was it. Jesus is meek and mild, but he's also very strong. This story spoke directly into the heart of this expert of the law. It got to the root of his disquiet. This poor man, he was looking for a way to salve his conscience and to be encouraged by the giving of the moral, the civil, and the ceremonial laws. Yet Jesus did the opposite. He made that poor man even more uncomfortable as he pointed out to him that he himself held a cultural bias against a people of close relationship to his own. The law of human nature contended against this poor man, and deep down he knew he was flawed. And you know what? We all are. So is there any hope for any of us? Love God with everything you are, everything you have. Love your neighbour as you love yourself. Simples, as a character says. Except it isn't, is it? And now I know many experts of the law. Sometimes I am that expert of the law. Let me give you one example. Some months ago, I was travelling on a train coming back from Coventry to London. I had booked a seat and been allocated one right near to where my bike had to go because I had cycled part distance when I was going up. And so it went into the carriage where the driver would sit when it's at the front, except now it was at the back because we were coming back. So I was coming back from Coventry, the bike was there, and I was given a seat. I had it on my ticket, so I came through the doors and there would be my seat. And I was really looking forward to that seat. I was a bit cold, I was a bit wet, and I was so much looking forward to sitting in a nice, warm, comfy seat. And that's when it happened. That's when I had this sudden epiphany that I was an expert in the law. Could someone get that, please? Me, an expert in the law, standing in a train carriage. And do you know why I had that epiphany? Because that's my seat. somebody was sitting in my seat. I was now an expert of the law. I knew they were in the wrong. I had a piece of card with my ticket and my seat reservation telling me they are in my seat. I am an expert of the law. So these things went through my head. Might they have gone down through your head? I looked at him, and there he was. He had the food tray down, right? He was slurping a drink really noisily, and he was eating some awfully smelly, sometimes crunchy, yet sometimes squidgy, some kind of pretend food. I reckon it was some kind of ultra-processed food that smelt, that dropped crumbs and was making a mess in my seat. I was not a happy bunny. I was an expert of the law. I knew as an expert of the law, I could demand that he move from my seat. Hey you, this is my seat. Here is my proof. And actually, I don't just want you to vacate that seat. I want you to clear up the mess you've made. Have you seen it? And the smell, what on earth are you eating? Something smelly on a train in a carriage where everyone else is going, oh, man, that's a bit whiffy. I was an expert of the law. So I would go up to him and I would tell him to move from his seat and to clean up. So, of course, you know what I did, don't you? I sat down the other side of the aisle because there was a seat available over there. It's what you might call an out-of-court settlement. It was also an act of bravery. You think I just cowered out of confronting him, didn't you? No, it was an act of bravery. I'd take the chance that the person who had booked to sit in one of the seats I was now sitting, when they get on at the next station, might not turn up, or they might sit somewhere else. So I was on the edge here. Would they come and chuck me out of my seat? Would they also be an expert in the law? Now I know I'm not the only expert in the law. A couple of weeks ago, Sarah told me about a stream of messages on social media telling me that I have many neighbours who are experts of the law. They were complaining about the noise of fireworks going off into and beyond the early hours of the morning. And neighbours shared the law on social media. You wouldn't have thought that our neighbours were so interested in the law, but actually we all are when it comes to it, aren't we? We all become experts of the law in little things. And the neighbours said, normally you're not allowed to be noisy in a neighbourhood after 11 p.m. Did you know that? That is a law. That is a law of the land, 11 p.m. But for some events, I can tell you what they are, because Sarah told me, she became an expert in the law from social media, that both the European New Year, the Chinese New Year, Guy Fawkes Night, or Bonfire Night, as it is known, and during the festival of Diwali, that there is a concession that noise and fireworks are permitted up to midnight. They get an extension. So why are these experts of the law complaining on social media? Well, it's because there are lots of bangs and noises going off till 1 o'clock or so in the morning. They were experts in the law, and they made sure that their judgments were publicly made. Experts. We all have times of being experts in the law. So, my own experience of a lack of sleep during that time confirmed that the law was right. It's helpful to have a time where noise is not allowed. So it gives those trying to sleep the opportunity to sleep. So I let you make your own lawful assessment about our neighbours. Were they in the right or were they in the wrong? By continuing lots of bangs and noise into the early hours. But this expert in the law that we started with, he made his own lawful assessments. And yet he also, like us, knew that he was flawed. The expert in the law thought he was on the right side of the law to hold the Samaritans with contempt. For they had known the law and rejected it, which meant, by extension, they rejected God. So in his eyes, God had also rejected them. I was an expert in the law. Sarah showed me about the experts of the law in the community. There are many contributors to being experts in the law. And I know that I stand among friends today who know how to apply your knowledge of being an expert in the law. But I hope too that as I am, that you too are flawed and that we need God's grace to be with us. And we need to share his grace and his mercy. Not to excuse necessarily. The law is there for a purpose and is very important. But what is greater than that law? What stands above that law? What puts it into its context of how each of us should generally apply that in our law? The Apostle James asks, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from desires that battle within you? It's the law of human nature. My job today is not simply to instruct you on how to apply your knowledge and to admit that, like me, we are bound by both the same code, as in the law of the land, God's law, and the law of human nature. We are bound by all three of those laws. But we are given the answer and the tools in which to overcome being legalistic, to overcome being judgmental. We are called into a community of people to be peacemakers. And our part in civil society is most important and most urgent. For who else will show mercy and peace, just as each of us have received, to our neighbour? Who of us can overcome those feelings of, I am an expert in the law, I'm going to put you in your place, and change that to a new narrative of bringing Jesus' gospel of peace into our relationships, into our communities? How? Well, Jesus has already answered. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and within all your mind. And not only that, love your neighbour as yourself. In giving the law context, through the story of the Good Samaritan, Jesus asks, which of these three do you think was a neighbour? The priest who went by on the other side, the Levite who went by on the other side, or the Samaritan who stopped and helped and cared and then put the person on his own donkey to take him to somewhere where he could be cared for? The expert in the law, you don't have to know, the expert in the law tells us the answer. Who was the neighbour? The one who has mercy. And so it turns out that he really was an expert in the law because he knew that answer, the one who has mercy. It turns out that the greatest law is not enshrined in any lawyer's manual. It's not enshrined in the constitution of any nation, of any culture. It is only the law of the Lord that gives us a chance of being at peace with ourselves and with our neighbour. The greatest law is the law of Jesus' love, grace and mercy. Go and do likewise. Amen.